Welcome back to the Great Indian AI Podcast channel, friends.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this deep dive. We're tackling a book that's like a legend,
Oh, yeah,
in the personal finance world.
definitely.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki,
For
the one that's been a bestseller forever, it feels like.
sure.
So if you're trying to improve your financial literacy, you're going to want to stick with us for this one.
Definitely will.
And we're going to uncover some really valuable insights
Yeah,
that you can use in your own financial journey right here on the Great Indian AI Podcast channel.
absolutely.
And hey, if you're finding this deep dive helpful, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, leave a comment below, and of course, subscribe to the Great Indian AI Podcast channel for more insightful content.
What I think is really interesting about Rich Dad Poor Dad is how it kind of like flips the script.
Yeah.
On the whole, go to school, get a good job advice
Right.
that a lot of us grew up with.
Yeah.
Instead, Kiyosaki introduces this idea of like two contrasting perspectives. His own father, the poor dad who was highly educated
Right.
but struggled financially, and his friend's father, the rich dad who was like a self-made entrepreneur
Yeah.
and just seemed to have a different understanding of money altogether.
It's really fascinating how these two contrasting figures, both father figures, right, in Kiyosaki's life,
Yeah,
shaped his understanding of money.
yeah.
And what really struck me was how their different approaches
Mm-hmm.
to a seemingly simple situation like Robert wanting to ask for a raise revealed
Totally.
such different mindsets.
Absolutely. So in that story, the poor dad encouraged Robert to advocate for himself.
Okay.
Demand higher wages. It's classic employee mindset, right? Working harder, proving your worth to earn more.
Yeah.
But Rich Dad saw that same situation as an opportunity to learn. So instead of focusing on a slightly bigger paycheck, he encouraged Robert to negotiate for the chance to learn more about the business,
Interesting.
how it operated, how money flowed through it.
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah.
It's not just about earning more, it's about understanding the whole system.
Right.
Like, how often do we miss those opportunities to learn and grow because we're so focused on the immediate gains?
Yeah, for sure.
Is this where Kiyosaki's famous assets versus liabilities lesson comes in?
Definitely. This idea is central to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The rich dad emphasizes that an asset puts money in your pocket,
Right.
while a liability takes money out.
Mm.
Regardless of how impressive it might seem,
Okay.
it challenges how we usually think about wealth. For example, a house. A house is often considered a sign of financial success.
Sure.
But if that house is draining your cash flow every month with mortgage payments, property taxes, maintenance costs,
Right.
is it really an asset?
That's such a thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
And I think most of us, myself included, would just instinctively consider a house an asset.
Of course.
So Rich Dad, Poor Dad forces you to reevaluate those assumptions. Makes you wonder, are there things in my own life
Exactly.
that I consider assets, but are actually liabilities in disguise? And it highlights a point that Kiyosaki makes repeatedly: the importance of financial literacy.
You hit the nail on the head there. Kiyosaki argues that traditional education often fails to equip us with the financial knowledge we need
Yeah.
to really thrive in the real world.
Yeah.
And he shares this kind of sobering story
Okay.
about the richest businessmen of 1923.
Okay.
Many of them died broke despite their immense wealth. Money alone doesn't guarantee financial security.
Right.
It's about understanding how to manage it, how to make it work for you, and for that you need financial literacy.
That story really drives the point home.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that even extraordinary financial success can be fleeting without the right knowledge and skills. And sadly, financial literacy isn't something that's widely taught. Now, I know Rich Dad, Poor Dad is famous for its cash flow quadrant, a way of categorizing different approaches to income generation. Can you walk us through that a bit and how it connects to the ideas we've been discussing?
So the cash flow quadrant is one of Kiyosaki's most iconic concepts. It breaks down the ways people generate income into 4 categories.
Okay.
Employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor. So Poor Dad, with his secure job, fits squarely in the employee quadrant,
Right.
relies on a paycheck from an employer. Rich Dad, on the other hand, focused on building businesses, placing him in the B quadrant, and investing in assets that generate income, putting him in the I quadrant.
So Rich Dad, Poor Dad encourages a shift from the left side of the quadrant, being an employee or self-employed, to the right side,
Yeah.
where you're building businesses and investing in assets that work for you.
Precisely. And it's not to say that being an employee or self-employed is wrong or bad, but Kiyosaki argues that the right side of the quadrant offers more opportunities for financial freedom and control over your income. Now, of course, this brings up a common fear for a lot of people, the fear of failure, leaving the security of a job. To start a business or invest can feel incredibly risky.
It's a fear I think we can all relate to on some level.
Absolutely.
And it's something that Kiyosaki addresses directly in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right?
Absolutely. Kiyosaki emphasizes that fear of failure is a major obstacle for people who want to achieve financial freedom.
Right.
He contrasts the way his poor dad let fear paralyze him with the way his rich dad saw failure as a stepping stone to success.
Interesting.
He even uses a historical analogy to drive home this point. Remember the Alamo.
I'm curious how that historical event ties into financial success.
Well, he uses the story of the Alamo to highlight how Texans turned a devastating defeat into a rallying cry for success.
Wow.
They didn't let failure crush their spirit. Instead, they used it as fuel to learn, adapt, and ultimately triumph.
Yeah.
It's a powerful analogy for how we can overcome fear and embrace the learning process that comes with taking financial risks.
That's a really inspiring way to frame failure. It's not the end of the story. It's just a chapter. It's about learning from those setbacks and coming back stronger. This is such a powerful message, and it really resonates with me. But it begs the question, how do we actually get started? This all sounds great in theory, but what are some practical steps that listeners can take after listening to this deep dive on the Great Indian AI podcast channel?
Kiyosaki stresses the importance of starting small. Invest in your financial education, attend seminars, read books, find mentors who can guide you. The key is to just open your mind to different ways of thinking about money. And start seeing opportunities that others might miss. And if you're loving this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad on the Great Indian AI podcast channel, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe.
So step one is to immerse ourselves in knowledge. And seek guidance from those who've walked this path before us. That's something we can all do regardless of our current financial situation.
For sure.
What other Rich Dad nuggets of wisdom can we share with our listeners?
So Kiyosaki talks about the importance of finding an opportunity that everyone else missed. He encourages us to look for bargains in all markets, from real estate to stocks. Think big and don't limit yourself to small-time thinking. Learn from history, both successes and failures, to understand how markets behave and identify patterns. And perhaps most importantly, don't be afraid to make a lot of offers. You might get rejected, but persistence is key.
I love that. It's about being proactive, doing your research, and not being afraid to put yourself out there. But all this talk about investing, finding deals, and building assets can feel a bit overwhelming, especially if you're starting from scratch. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling a little lost or unsure about where to begin?
One of the most valuable pieces of advice Kiyosaki gives is to overcome your fear of toilets.
Wait, toilets. I'm not sure I follow.
It's a metaphor, of course.
Okay.
He's talking about how people often dismiss opportunities because they seem messy or unpleasant. So take real estate, for example. It can be a fantastic way to build wealth. But a lot of people shy away from it because they don't want to deal with the hassle of tenants repairs or property management.
Sure.
But that's just noise, as Kiyosaki calls it. A savvy investor looks beyond the surface and sees the potential for passive income and long-term growth.
That makes sense. It's about looking beyond the initial discomfort or inconvenience to see the bigger picture. Don't let fear or aversion to the toilets of investing hold you back from potential opportunities. Speaking of opportunities, does Rich Dad, Poor Dad provide any specific examples of how to spot these hidden gems?
Kiyosaki shares a great anecdote about a friend who purchased a rundown house that came with 4 extra empty lots. Nobody else saw the potential, but he did.
Wow.
He tore down the house, sold the lots, and made a tidy profit. It's a great example of thinking outside the box and seeing value where others don't.
That's a brilliant example. It highlights the importance of thinking creatively and not being afraid to challenge conventional wisdom. But what if you don't have a lot of capital to invest up front? How do you get started when you're working with limited resources?
That's where the skill of raising capital comes in. Kiyosaki emphasizes that it's not always about going to the bank for a loan. It's about learning how to find investors, structure deals, and get creative with financing. He even shares how he once purchased an apartment building for $1.2 million without using any of his own money.
Hold on. $1 million property with no money down. Sounds almost impossible.
Yeah.
Can you explain how that's even possible?
Unfortunately, we're going to have to take a quick break before we dive into that. But don't worry, we'll be right back with part 2 of our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad on the Great Indian AI podcast channel. And trust me, you won't want to miss it.
And we'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome back to the Great Indian AI podcast channel. Now, before the break, we were talking about Kiyosaki's incredible feat, buying $1 million property with no money down. It sounds like magic, but it really boils down to mastering the art of deal making and leveraging financial tools. He was able to secure the property through a combination of creative financing strategies, like seller financing, and partnerships.
That's incredible. It really shows that with the right knowledge and approach,
Right.
you can achieve things that seem impossible.
Yeah.
At first glance, it's about seeing opportunities where others see obstacles. But securing a deal is only one part of the equation, right?
Okay.
What other skills does Kiyosaki emphasize for building wealth?
So Kiyosaki highlights the importance of financial intelligence, which he breaks down into 4 key areas: understanding accounting, investing, markets, and the law. He argues that these areas are essential for making informed decisions.
So it's not just about having money, it's about understanding how money works. But mastering those 4 areas sounds like a daunting task. Where do we even begin?
Kiyosaki suggests finding mentors, individuals who've already achieved what you aspire to.
Okay.
Learn from their experiences, pick their brains, and absorb their wisdom. He also stresses the importance of continuous learning. Attending seminars, reading books, listening to podcasts like the Great Indian AI podcast channel, and constantly expanding your financial knowledge. Remember, the more you know, the more opportunities you'll see.
That makes perfect sense. It's like any other skill. The more you practice and learn, the better you become. But what about taking action? I'm ready to start building my asset column. What kinds of assets does Kiyosaki recommend?
So Kiyosaki outlines a few categories of assets. Businesses that don't require your constant presence,
Okay.
real estate, paper assets like stocks and bonds, and commodities like gold and silver.
So the key is finding assets that generate income without requiring you to constantly trade your time for money. That's the dream.
Yeah.
But how do we find these golden opportunities? We've talked about overcoming the fear of toilets. But are there any other practical tips for spotting those hidden gems?
Kiyosaki emphasizes the importance of finding an opportunity that everyone else missed.
Right.
He gives the example of his friend who saw potential in a rundown house with extra empty lots that everyone else overlooked.
Right.
He emphasizes thinking outside the box
Yeah.
and not being afraid to explore unconventional avenues.
It's about challenging assumptions and seeing value where others don't. It makes you realize that opportunities are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with the right perspective to uncover them. But finding those opportunities is just the first step. What about actually making those investments? Besides finding deals and raising capital, are there any other crucial skills for building wealth?
Kiyosaki might surprise you here. He emphasizes the importance of sales and marketing. He even suggests that aspiring authors should take sales courses. He learned early on that being able to communicate your ideas effectively is critical for success in any field, especially when it comes to building a business or securing investments.
That's an interesting point. It's not just about being good at what you do. It's about being able to articulate your vision and persuade others to believe in it. It's like the whole package: expertise, financial intelligence, and effective communication. But even with all the right skills and knowledge, investing can still be daunting. How do we deal with the fear and risk that inevitably come with it?
Well, Kiyosaki doesn't shy away from the emotional side of investing. He acknowledges the fear of losing money, the doubts that can creep in, that inner voice that screams the sky is falling. But he also offers strategies for managing those fears.
I know that feeling all too well. That inner voice can be quite persuasive, especially when faced with uncertainty. How do we silence that voice and make smart investment decisions?
Kiyosaki advises us to do what Colonel Sanders did to his little chicken. He fried it.
Okay, that's a vivid image, but I appreciate the humor. Seriously though, how do we overcome those doubts and make decisions that align with our financial goals?
It's not about eliminating fear altogether.
Right.
It's about understanding it and using it to your advantage. Remember the Alamo. Turn your setbacks into fuel for growth.
Yeah.
Learn from your mistakes. Get back in the game and keep playing to win.
So it's about acknowledging those fears, but not letting them paralyze us. It's about learning, adapting, and building resilience. Kiyosaki seems to really emphasize the importance of mindset, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. He even talks about overcoming laziness. Now, this might seem counterintuitive because most people associate wealth building with hard work. But Kiyosaki's talking about a different kind of laziness.
What kind of laziness are we talking about here? It sounds like a bit of a paradox. How can you be busy and lazy at the same time?
He's referring to the kind of laziness that keeps you stuck in a rut, even if you're working hard. You might be busy paying bills and going through the motions, but you're not actively working toward building your financial future. You're letting your money control you instead of the other way around.
That's a really insightful distinction. It's not just about being busy. It's about being strategic with your time and energy and making sure your efforts are aligned with your goals. Now, speaking of being strategic, I know Kiyosaki is a big advocate of paying yourself first.
Right.
Can you explain what that means
Yeah.
and why it's so important?
So paying yourself first means prioritizing your asset column
Okay.
above everything else. Before you pay bills, before you buy groceries, before you even pay taxes, set aside money to invest in assets that will generate more income. It's about shifting your mindset from spending to investing.
But for many people, that might seem impossible. What if you're already living paycheck to paycheck?
Yeah.
How can you possibly pay yourself first when you're barely making ends meet?
Well, Kiyosaki argues that the pressure of having to pay your bills will force you to get creative and find new ways to make money.
Interesting.
It's like lighting a fire under yourself to generate more income.
It's like turning financial pressure into motivation for growth.
Yeah.
But what if those bills start piling up? Won't creditors start knocking at your door?
Of course, it's important to be responsible with your finances. But Kiyosaki's point is that you'll be more motivated to find solutions and build wealth when you prioritize your financial future.
Right.
He's not advocating ignoring your responsibilities, but rather shifting your mindset so that building wealth becomes your top priority.
It's a radical shift in perspective, but I can see how it could be incredibly empowering. It's about taking control of your financial destiny instead of feeling trapped by circumstances. But with all this talk about taking risks, finding deals, and making investments, it's clear that you need a certain level of knowledge and expertise to navigate this world successfully.
What about those of us who don't have a background in finance? How do we avoid costly mistakes?
Kiyosaki emphasizes the importance of building a team of professionals, attorneys, accountants, brokers, and other experts in their fields.
He even stresses the importance of paying them well, because their expertise should ultimately help you generate more wealth.
So it's not about being cheap. It's about investing in the right people who can guide you and protect your interests. It's about leveraging their expertise to make smarter decisions. Now, beyond the technical skills and strategies, are there any other rich dad secrets to success?
Kiyosaki surprisingly highlights the power of giving back. He learned from his own rich dad the importance of tithing, giving to charity even when you're not flush with cash.
That's an interesting concept. Give away money when you don't have much yourself. How does that make sense in the context of building wealth?
It's about shifting your mindset from scarcity to abundance.
Okay.
When you give freely, Kiyosaki believes you attract more abundance into your life. He sees generosity as a key ingredient in building wealth.
It's a beautiful concept. The more you give, the more you receive. It's about creating a positive cycle of abundance, both financially and spiritually.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that wealth is not just about accumulating money. It's about creating a life of purpose and fulfillment. And that often involves contributing to something larger than yourself.
This has been such an insightful conversation so far. We've covered so much ground, from challenging conventional wisdom about assets and liabilities to understanding the cash flow quadrant and overcoming the fear of failure. And we've even delved into the importance of mindset, giving back, and building a team of experts. But we're not done yet. There's still more to explore in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Welcome back to the Great Indian AI podcast channel for the last part of our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I'm feeling so energized after our discussion so far.
Me too.
It's amazing how just one book can shift your entire perspective on money and success.
It really is. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is more than just like a financial guide. It's like a blueprint for designing a life of freedom and purpose.
And one of the key takeaways, I think, for me has been the importance of taking control of your financial future. Not letting fear or complacency hold you back. Kiyosaki really challenges us to question those limiting beliefs that often keep us stuck in the rat race.
Absolutely. He encourages readers to move beyond that traditional path,
Yes.
Go to school, get a good job, work for 40 years and retire. He advocates for creating your own path, building your own assets, and ultimately becoming financially independent.
It's about breaking free from the idea that you have to trade your time for money and instead building systems that generate income even when you're not actively working. Now, we've talked about the cash flow quadrant and the importance of moving from the employee or self-employed side to the business owner and investor side. But for a lot of people, that leap can feel really overwhelming. What advice would you give to someone who's ready to make that shift, but isn't sure where to start?
Kiyosaki emphasizes the importance of finding your passion. He believes that true wealth is not just about money. It's about aligning your financial goals with your passions and purpose.
So it's not just about chasing money for money's sake. It's about finding something that genuinely excites you.
Right.
And building a business or investment strategy around that passion. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot where your skills, interests, and financial goals intersect. But even when you found your passion, there's still that challenge of actually turning it into a profitable venture.
What are some practical steps for transforming your passion into a source of income?
Kiyosaki stresses the importance of identifying problems that people are willing to pay to have solved.
Okay.
He encourages readers to look around, observe their communities, and ask themselves, what are the pain points that people are struggling with? What solutions can I offer that would make their lives easier, better, or more fulfilling? It's about finding those unmet needs in the market and offering a product or service that provides real value. But even with a great idea, how do you actually get started?
Right.
A lot of people get stuck in the planning phase, overthinking, overanalyzing their ideas without ever taking action.
Kiyosaki's advice is simple. Just do it.
Yeah.
He believes that action is the key to unlocking opportunities and overcoming fear. He encourages readers to start small, test their ideas, learn from their mistakes. He believes that the experience you gain from taking action is far more valuable than any amount of planning or theorizing.
It's about getting out of your head
Exactly.
and into the real world. Test your assumptions, gather feedback, and iterate along the way. And don't be afraid to fail. Remember the Alamo. Embrace those setbacks as learning opportunities.
Yeah.
Now, throughout our discussion of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, we've touched on so many valuable concepts. Assets versus liabilities, the cash flow quadrant, overcoming fear, finding your passion, taking action.
Right.
But if you have to boil it all down to one key takeaway, what would be?
I would say the most important lesson in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the power of shifting your mindset. It's about moving away from the scarcity mentality that keeps so many people trapped in the rat race.
Right.
And embracing an abundance mindset that opens up possibilities and opportunities.
It's about believing in your own potential.
Yeah.
And taking ownership of your financial future. It's about understanding that you have the power to create the life you want, regardless of your current circumstances.
That's right.
That's such a powerful message, and it's really resonated with me throughout this deep dive.
And I hope it resonated with our listeners as well. Remember, financial freedom is not just about money.
Yeah.
It's about having the time, the resources, and the choices to live a life that is aligned with your values.
Right.
And passions.
This has been such an incredible journey through Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We've covered so much ground, and I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on money, success, and the power of taking control of your own destiny. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise with us today.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy discussing these important concepts and hopefully inspiring others to take charge of their financial well-being.
And to our listeners on the Great Indian AI podcast channel, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it valuable, as we did. And remember, the journey to financial freedom starts with a single step. Take what you've learned today and start applying it to your own life. Don't be afraid to challenge your assumptions, seek out new knowledge, and take action. And before we sign off, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Great Indian AI podcast channel for more insightful content like this. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving to create the life you deserve.